Hello, fellow Hyperboreans. Dave here, the developer of the Hyperborea system for Foundry VTT, bringing you another video with some new features and maybe even showing off, or at least talking about, a couple of bug fixes that I've done over the last month or so. The last video was from release 1.5.1, and now this video goes up through 1.6.2, which represents 3 releases since the last video. And we're going to showcase a number of new features, probably talk about a couple of bug fixes as well that have been done over these past few releases. So starting with release 1.5.2, we had 2 big features that were included in that release. The first one was a button to automatically level up a character. So if you look at that, if I open up Argyros here, essentially it's this little book button right up here next to his level. And if I click it, it's going to ask me if I want to do it. It's warning that it's going to replace some values. And I click confirm. Oh, look, not enough XP to level up. 8,001 is less than 16,000. And that's what it's doing. It's just looking at these 2 numbers, and that's all. I say, oh, of course, I forgot to level myself, or I forgot to update my experience points. Okay, now I'm at 16,000 like I should be. Incidentally, you can have commas in here and make it more easily readable. That's totally fine. It will properly interpret that as an integer, as long as it is an integer and not have letters in it. Once I do that, I can level up the character. You can see it jump to level 5. I can actually go over here in the chat, and you can see everything that was changed with the move to level 5. So you can see it updated my XP. You can see it did an increase of my hit points for me, so it rolled the number automatically. It increased my fighting ability. He's a fighter. His turning ability, he has a magic item that grants him turning ability, so that is unchanged. But it happened to note that he has turning ability, so it left it alone. And then my saving throws were updated as well with the move to level 5. And that's everything that has changed. And now if I do it again, we'll just change that to 32,000. We'll level up again. Tell it okay. And you'll note from level 5 to level 6, the saving throws do not change at this level. So that's what happens when there's no change from level to level, since saving throws generally only change every other level or every odd level, let's say. So that's how that works. Pretty straightforward, just a click of the button. It does work for every character class, and it does these basic items. So the hit point increase, fighting, turning, and casting ability for spellcasters, it updates that as well based on the class, saving throws, those items. Okay, so the other major, the other main feature that was included with release 1.5.2 was sort of a bug, and it's the idea that Bards and Shamans actually need 2 sets of spells per day boxes because they draw from 2 different spell lists. So if I have a sample bard here that I created just to show this off. And you can see now we've got 2 rows of spells per day, and you can even see which class it's assigned to. Okay, so when you create a new bard or a new shaman, this will be created and populated automatically. For a regular, non-bard or non-shaman, but any other type of spellcaster, let's just put it that way. Like Rayson here, she is actually a Leisured Manist, which is basically a thief wizard. You can see for her, she's just got the magician spell list. And by the way, this magician, this field here that has the class, this is a new field that wasn't in previous releases. So this was added because of the fact that we have 2 rows of spells per day and you need to know which class is for which. So I just included it across the board so you know exactly which class list you're drawing from for your spells. Leisured Manist draws from magician. You can change this, by the way. Some classes have multiples that you can choose from. For example, if you are a warlock, you might be a magician, or you could be a cryomancer or a pyromancer or a necromancer. Well, by default, the system is just going to fill in magician, but you can certainly change that if you're going to choose to be one of the alternative spellcaster types for the warlock. And same goes for any other class where you have different sort of specializations to choose from. The system selects the most common default, but you can change it to whatever you need to. So Bards and Shamans have 2 spells per day rows. That was the main feature that was included. So those are the two main things included in release 1.5.2. Moving on to release 1.6.1 then, we had a number of fairly significant features, which is why I incremented that middle number from 5 to 6. So the first one was this feature or capability to set NPC tokens scale and size based on the creature size. So as an example, you can see my orc necromancer here is large, and he's a 2x2 square instead of just a single square like most tokens by default. And essentially what I did was I just built it into the loading script for the game, so it would scan the compendia, looking for any actors and then specifically focusing on NPCs. It would also look at your actors directory, which is this piece right here that I'm looking at, all these actors listed here. So as an example, the mountain ape, which is also known as an ogre and is large by default. What actually gets updated, I'll just show you this. Under prototype token, we go to appearance. It's this dimensions right here. For a large creature, these are the fields that would be updated. By default, they're a 1. It changes it to a 2 for a large creature. And so then when I drag him onto the map, of course, he is large, as you would expect. The flip side, for a small creature, like an Archaeopteryx, that is to say, prototype, again, appearance, it does not change the dimensions. What it changes is the scale, which by default is 1.0, but we set it to 0.5. And what that does is, when I drag the Archaeopteryx onto the map now, it's still centered in the square. It's just half scale. That's how that works. So that was built into 1.6.1, and it was automatic. But then I got a great idea from a user who said he had a ton of personal compendia that he had written, that he had created with NPC monsters in there. And unfortunately, it changed some things that he did not want changed. What the recommendation was simply, can we make this optional? And I thought, well, that's a fantastic idea. So I went ahead and implemented that with release 1.6.2. So now that is an optional feature. If we go into the configuration settings here and we look at Hyperborea, it's this one right here, resize small and large NPC tokens. It is disabled by default. So if you enable that, it will do the changes. And by the way, it now only scans your actors directory, but not your compendia. Since many compendia come in from external sources and they're often a read-only, and you may want a sort of a master copy that remains unchanged from what you initially installed, and that was what I realized. So I decided to make it less impactful by not changing your compendia, but it will scan your actors directory, that is to say this list right here, and make those changes if you have this box checked, which is not checked by default. Okay, that's the default behavior. So I did that for release 1.6.2, which is just coming out today, which is to say Thursday, April 24th, 2025. Okay, so we've got that. Then the next feature with 1.6.1, because that's really where we were focused, was that items and spells with multiple effects should display multiple effect buttons in the chat. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this came up actually in gameplay. I'm sorry, not in gameplay. Well, I should say play testing, more appropriately. I was testing some things out, and I realized, just happened to notice, that the bark skin spell can have 2 different effects, depending on whether the recipient is wearing armor or not. And I realized that if I wanted to use effects for that spell, I would have to have 2 different effects. The most easy way to do it, I thought, was to have 2 different effects and apply them appropriately, just based on a decision, based on the situation. So let me show you what I'm talking about here. So if we look at spells and we look at bark skin, which of course is not a magic user spell, but I just threw it on here for testing. And so what I did was, under effects, I created 2 different effects, one for bark skin with armor, one for bark skin without armor. With armor, the change that it makes is it adjusts your armor class by 1. So it gives you a +1 AC bonus. Without armor, it sets your armor class to a 4. Now this is where it takes a little bit of tweaking for this particular spell, but what I did was, first of all, it also does a DR, So it applies damage resistance of 1. So I can do that right there. And then the temp AC mod, I just made it a 4. Now this would have to be edited. So as a GM or a player, if I cast the spell and put it on someone, they might have to go in and change this number, which a player can do on their own character sheet. So this effect would get applied to the character under the character sheet, and I'll show you how that works. So we set these two effects. So that's the difference between the two effects here. But now how do I handle this? Up until version 1.6.1, there was a single apply multiple effects button, and it would try to apply both of these, and you'd be double dipping bonuses, and obviously you don't want that. So now what happens is if I cast this spell, and we'll just go ahead and cast it, and then I can just apply it to Andronakos, and you can see I've got two buttons here. That's exactly what I was talking about. Andronakos is not wearing armor. He has a ring of protection but no armor. So I'm going to apply it without armor, and you can see it applied it without armor. And if I go into his effects, there it is. And you can see those two changes were made, and if I needed to adjust them as a player, I could just say, oh, actually that should be a 2. Because he already has some well, this was without armor, but for whatever reason, let's say I wanted to adjust that to a 2, because what the spell does is it sets your AC to a base of 5, plus your dex bonus, of course. And so I made it 4 because a base AC for a person is 9. Minus 4 equals the 5. But if you had to change that to something else for whatever reason, you could do so. But as it is, there you go. Now, like I said, he's wearing a ring of protection, so that kind of messes things up. But if that's where you might have to adjust that number or whatever because of other magic items. This sort of goes back to the fact that those of you who have been using the system for a while may remember this auto-calculate armor class is an optional feature, because there are some cases where you have this confluence of magic items and spells, or magic items and magic items, where multiple items can incorrectly calculate AC simply because it gets too confusing for the system to figure out. So I made it an optional feature that you can disable if you want. Personally, I'd say, the vast majority of cases, this is going to calculate correctly and you can leave it enabled. And maybe once in a while you have to adjust things like I was just talking about with the bark skin, where maybe I say, oh yeah, that shouldn't actually be adjusting his armor class by that much. Let's just go in here, let's change this number to whatever it should be, and you're good to go. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove that effect now. So anyway, that bark skin spell was literally what drove the whole feature of changing apply multiple effects button into multiple buttons to apply different effects, so that the player or GM can choose which one or ones to apply. Let's see. The last major feature that was included in release 1.6.1 was that I added a modifier for actor initiative rolls. And at the same time, I added 2 new custom token statuses. So if you look here, you saw that I popped this out here. These 2 new ones, hasted and slowed, I've added these to the system. So you get a little running man for hasted, a snail for slowed, and I have actually applied the snail one to my orc necromancer and the running man to my fighter Argyros here. Now by default, these don't do anything. The actual system does not apply any penalties or bonuses to initiative or movement or anything else, but they are there so that, of course, you just have that knowledge that, oh, he's slowed and he's hasted. But what you can do is you can then create an effect if you wish. And this came up because of zombies. Because zombies are basically by default in a slowed status. They always act last in the round, last in initiative. That's the rule for zombies. And so I thought, well, this came through in actual playing, where I was a player and we were fighting some zombies and we were having to fiddle with their initiative to make them act last in the round. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to do that. And so I implemented this feature so that you can apply slowed, which doesn't do anything, but then you can go in and you can add an effect, this variable right here, system.temp initiative mod, and just add a large number. I do minus 98. And what that does is that just obviously drops their initiative score way down. Since you're rolling a d6 and adding a few small fractions for melee versus movement or spell casting, and also for your dexterity. But those are fractions of 1. They're not even a full 1. So if we roll a 4, it's going to be 4 point something. It's never going to go above into the 5 range. But if you use temp initiative mod, you can subtract like you would for slowed creatures like for zombies. The slow spell itself does not affect your initiative, incidentally. I checked that, double checked it in the rules. Neither does haste. They affect the number of actions you can make in a round, but they do not affect your initiative. However, if there's some other special cases, like zombies, you can use this variable to affect their initiative during combat. And you can make it positive or negative. So our Orc Necromancer is whatever magically slowed to the point where his reflexes are slower, so his initiative is negatively impacted. In the same way, I did the same thing with Argyros just for fun, for testing purposes. He's hasted, and if I look at that, the effects, I gave him a plus 0.9. Because I didn't necessarily want him to jump way ahead of everybody else, but I wanted him to be ahead of anyone within his group. So he would be first in his group no matter what actions were being taken. There are plenty of cases where this will actually jump him a full number up. So if the group rolls a 4, Argyros might actually be 5 point something. That's fine. Doesn't hurt anything. It just makes sure that he is first in his group to act. So that's how I did the temp initiative mod variable. It's system.tempInitiative mod, and you can adjust it up or down like that. So those were the 3 features in release 1.6.1. The NPC token scaling and sizing, first feature. Second feature was the multiple spell list and spells per day rows for bards and shamans. And the third item was the initiative modifier. So now we come to release 1.6.2, which came out today. So as I previously already mentioned, the token scaling, I have now made that optional with release 1.6.2. So that's an option which is not turned on by default. The next feature was, and then actually the rest of these are actually bug fixes. None of them are showstoppers, but they could be kind of annoying, and I've known about them for a little while and just finally got around to dealing with it. So the first one was that the critical hit damage dialog tries to apply that damage immediately, but players by default cannot apply damage to NPCs like monster tokens, meaning that you would either get an error that no token was selected for the critical damage to apply to, or the player might click their own token because that's the only one they can click, and then they roll or to apply that critical damage, and it applies it to their character, which of course they don't want. So this fixes that issue. So from now on, if you roll a critical, and I'll actually just do this, we'll target him. I will just use my flaming sword, and I have it set to allow me to tell it I want to roll a 20. So we do the 20. You can see I hit the Orc Necromancer with a critical. We'll roll our critical. Not that it matters much, but if I now do the damage, there's my damage roll. Now I'm going to say, okay, I did ×2 damage, but it doesn't matter. I could do it for any of these 3. This was where the bug was. As soon as I clicked one of these buttons, it would try to apply it to the monster right away, and you'd get that error message. Or it would be applied to my own character because I had Argyros selected. Right now I have no tokens selected, so if I do this, well, in the old system you would get an error, but now in the new system you can see no tokens selected. Doesn't matter because all it does is the extra damage roll. So it did an extra d8 for double damage, and then it adds that 5 to the original 10 that was rolled up here, so I have 15 hit points of damage, and you have this nice apply damage button. This, of course, needs to be used by the GM or the referee in order to really apply it. So as a referee, I can select Orc Necromancer, apply the damage, and it's done. Now there's 2 other things to mention here. Number 1, the extra damage dice, up until this release, they were applying all of these extra modifiers, the item damage modifier, the strength damage, mastery modifier, those were all being doubled up as well. So you would see 1d8 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1, down here for the extra damage roll, which is not correct. Rules as written is only double the dice, not the modifiers. So I've fixed that bug. So that was another bug fix separate from the critical damage dialog trying to apply the damage to the monster right away. The other specific combat related bug that I fixed in this release is that damage resistance up until now has been applied to all damage. However, rules as written is that DR should only be applied to melee and missile weapons, but not to spells, not to like grenade-like weapons like, burning oil or falling damage, things like that. Area effect spells does not apply to that. So I've now changed the system so that it does look at the type of damage being done, and it only applies DR to melee and missile weapons. It does not apply it for grenade-like weapons. So if you remember, a grenade-like weapon is quite literally something like this burning flask I have set up. And if you look in the attributes, you have grenade-like item checked. That's what it's looking at. So if you have an item set up as a grenade with a grenade tag, it will not apply DR to this type of weapon. Same for area effect attack. So this would be something like a dragon's breath weapon, which of course there are no dragons in Hyperborea. What would it be like? Well, it would be like any monster that can breathe fire or breathe acid or whatever. This area effect tag. These are the two items that are, even for, if you set them up as missile weapons, these would still be ignored when it comes to DR. So also, DR does not apply to any spells ever. So if you have a spell where DR should be applied, you'll have to do that manually. Because by default, we just said, okay, I just said DR is not going to apply to spells because I simply didn't know and didn't want to take the time to research every possible damaging spell to see where DR should apply and where it shouldn't. In fact, to be honest, I'm not even sure if it mentions it in all of the spell descriptions. So it may be a GM or a referee decision anyway. So for now, all spells, DR is ignored. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else? Yes, there was one other bug fix for release 1.6.2, and that was item rolls from the macro bar. And so what happened? What would happen was, let's see, I've got these up here. So my thief here, Artemisia, she has all of her skills set up, and many of these are set up. Like if I open up Move Silently as an example. Oh, this one's a public roll. Let me find what. Let me find. Let's see. Is Hide set up as blind GM? Yeah. So her Hide skill is set up as a blind GM roll because she does not know if she's been successful or not. Move Silently, I guess she would. My assumption was that she would hear her own noise and realize that she had failed because maybe she tripped on a rock or something crazy like that. In any case, Hide is set up as blind GM roll, and it is correctly honored. Hide, when I roll from here, you get blind GM roll here, and if I use it, now I'm logged in as GM, so I'm going to see it, but you can see the different color here. This indicates that it's a blind GM roll, and the player, neither the player nor any other players at the table, the player running the Artemisia character nor any other players would actually see these values. It's a blind GM roll. However, the bug was that if I did the same hide roll from the macro bar down here, and I created these just by dragging them from my character sheet. So I went like this. I would take hide and I would just drag it down here like that, and there it is. Okay. Now I know I've got that in here. Yeah, it's right here. So I'm going to delete this one, just drag it back off so it's gone. So this hide is here. It's actually a pointer to the one right on Artemisia's character sheet. But up until now, this was not honoring the blind GM roll. It was not honoring the roll mode as defined in the character sheet, or the item in the character sheet. So what would happen is this would come up as public roll by default, and it would roll public. So now I've now fixed that, so when you actually click this button, the system actually looks at the selection in the character's skill and sets it appropriately here. So when I roll it, it will come up as a blind GM roll, as you would expect. So that is a bug that's also fixed. So really it was a total of like 5 bugs fixed for release 1.6.2. I don't think any of them were really showstoppers, but they could, any or all of them could be annoying for different people at different times. So that's everything in release 1.6.2. And that covers all of the new things that I've done in the last month or so. Quite a bit of stuff. So I hope you all are having fun with the system. And remember, I'm almost always in the Hyperborea Discord, or I should say the Northwind Adventures Discord. I'm in there pretty much daily anyways, keeping an eye on things. So if you post something in the, especially in the Hyperborea VTT channel, you can almost be certain that I will see that same day or within a day, and often I will respond in some way, shape, or form. So have fun, Hyperboreans. Happy adventuring. This is Dave signing off.